have our time just after 2.5 Gamers. I'm also a fan of their podcast, and of course it's a bit challenging to talk after them because they are, scene animals. Let's say we are just, data scientists, so it's a bit different. But we'll try not to bore you. Just a short introduction if you don't know us. I'm Kamil, there's Wojtek with me. We are part of Arte Data. It's a company founded 7 years ago. We are doing data analytics and data science and data engineering for various customers. So we are a services company. And we gathered a lot of experience working with mobile gaming companies. What we do, we build solutions, we maintain them, but we also act as an analytical data team of our customers. Especially in mobile gaming, we are often the only data team of those companies. And we gathered a lot of experience and we want to share you our best practices, observations, and how could you potentially do it on your own or with the company as us. But I think the purpose of the session is to show you challenges and good practices to work with data. Taking a look from my perspective and our perspective on the gaming world, because there are different perspectives. If you are a developer, you have different perspective. If you are responsible for user acquisition or monetization or whatever, or graphic, you have different perspective. But from our perspective, application or publisher or the gaming studio has, let's say, a couple of important processes which are very, data enabled. First of all, of course, is the app development. Then, when you have your application, you constantly develop it, you have to test it, you have to do A/B tests, you have to do experiments, you have to measure how this application fits your users, your segments of users, and everything what was said before, if you do it well, properly, etc. So, a lot of data goes here. Then, when you have the application, you of course need to gather your users. So you have the whole user acquisition process with all those organic, paid, number of networks, other marketing, and all those costs related to this. So you spend a lot of money to gather users, and unfortunately, they do not live very long in your application. They die pretty quickly, but of course it's another part of the game, so keeping the retention. And then of course during the time when those people are in the application, we need to monetize them either with subscriptions, with ad monetization, or with in-app purchases, or everything together. And what's important, it looks like a cycle, but in reality, everything happens all the time at the same moment because we are iterating very fast. So publishers, game studios are iterating very fast. The versions of applications are happening every month or even faster in some cases. And versions of experiments and A/B tests are creating huge complexity because we have to take care of all of the parts together and talk with the same language and not to split that into silos, because otherwise we will have another challenge, maybe to have strategy where UA drives that way, monetization drives that way, and app development that way, and at the end of the day we are finishing with no money in our account. So it's important to think about that, as about the process and the company and the business. So that's how we look at it, and that's how we support companies to do that. And my question to you, if you can take your mobile phones and scan it, it's Menti, we do not gather any data. I have a question to you. So can you have your phone and scan this QR code? You will have a few questions. Everybody has? You should see the question. Yeah? Does it work? So I ask you to answer. You can choose two of answers. What's from your perspective, or what you believe is the biggest challenge with data in mobile gaming? Okay. Can I switch to answers? Okay, let's see, what do you think? So, the questions were, unstable and changing data sources. Technology, selection of appropriate tools and technology. Skills and finding the right people. Multitude of simultaneous needs. Difficulty in translating conclusions into action. Or maybe differences between data sources and systems. So, from our perspective, all are valid, but of course, what we observe is that this is a very dynamic market, and the application of data is really dynamic in comparison to many other verticals, like e-commerce or telco or retail or any other classical business. So from that perspective, it's pretty unstable from the data source perspective and pretty dynamic from all those various areas where we need to do data analytics together. So, of course, why we founded the company? Because we believe that technology at the cloud times is pretty simple and doable. I will cover it in a while, but shortly. But skills and knowledge, how to do that, and then actionability, how to use outcomes of data analysis and machine learning models, algorithms into action, that's the biggest challenge. And taking a look on challenges, taking a look at challenges from our perspective. The biggest challenge is how to find the way to methodically work with data in mobile gaming studio or publisher. How to create a process, because it's not ad hoc action, it's a process which is taking part every day, every week, every month. Second, how to manage that dynamic digital product analytics. Why dynamic? If you have, for example, 10 titles, you can imagine that you have 2 releases every month. You can imagine that you have 4 4 experiments every month, and every experiment has 4 variants. Multiplying that, even with just 10 titles, you can have hundreds of digital products simultaneously, and you need to analyze them in all those dimensions. Second thing is how to maintain data environment and some technology behind, and how to answer the needs of different parts of the business. So user acquisition, app development, monetization, and of course the general business part. From the technology perspective, it's shown on Google blogs, but doesn't matter. Honestly speaking, it was presented on Google Game Camp, so that's why it's Google. So we use, for example, some connections to data sources, some transfers. Google is pretty easy to use for mobile gaming because it's natively integrated with Firebase, it's natively integrated with Google Analytics, it's natively easily integrated with Google Marketing Platform, which is heavily used in mobile world. So that's why Google is pretty popular in mobile gaming as a platform. But from that, this is easy. This is very easy in comparison to many other verticals. Then you gather that to data warehouse type of solution, and you can analyze data, build reporting, and create machine learning models. And for example, in Google BigQuery, it's pretty easy. But what I mentioned, you have that complexity and multiple of digital products at the same time. So at a certain moment of time, the complexity starts to be difficult, and it needs to be managed. So we usually add another layer to this architecture, which is managing the code. Because if you can imagine, if you have that example of 10 titles and different versions, you can have, for example, 200,000 lines of SQL code in your data warehouse. So it starts to be pretty complicated. So we introduced the layer of modeling data in the data warehouse for our customers to document what is happening and to be able to share it within a bigger team of data analysts and data scientists and engineers. So this is the simple part, but what for? From the use case perspective, we have various needs which could be analytically touched. So of course, first of all, we want to measure. What we believe is important is to measure that from the financial perspective, because what I mentioned in the beginning, every game or every set of games is some kind of business which needs to be at the end of the day profitable, and we should build some kind of layer of KPIs which is unique for all parts of that cycle on the app development, user acquisition, monetization. And one of those metrics is related, of course, to ROAS. so revenue over advertisement spent. And from that perspective, we usually observe that we start from user acquisition reports to measure it properly, to gather the data on the revenue, on the cost, on the user behavior, on the any possible dimensions which are valid to us. So highly cross-dimensional, up to every geo, every country, every application version, etc. Why it is important? It is important because this is not one silver bullet shot game. It's like puzzles. If you are able to differentiate your game versions into different verticals or different networks where you gather your users or different segments of your users, then you can bring bigger value in each and every piece, and together have a bigger value of your return and bigger return on investment of the whole company. Not one size fits all, but many sizes fits many cross dimensions. Then, of course, if we have enough data, important part is to predict what's possible. It's always better to predict than guess. And predictions of ROAS, lifetime value, retention are very important. And why they are important? Because if you spend money on user acquisition and you do not predict expected outcome on your ROAS with good accuracy for another 120 days or even 360 days, then it's a big risk that you are burning money here. And those are the biggest costs in publishing in comparison to the rest. So this is extremely important to know after first 3, 5, 7 days that this campaign makes sense and this campaign doesn't make sense, and play with it every day. Same, when you develop your application, it's good to know that another version, 150 version of application in this experiment and variant is potentially profitable based on the behavior of users and other metrics gathered together. So if you put the same semantic layer to that, and we are able to do that, we can also develop our version and look at experiments and A/B test from that potential outcome, which is lifetime value and ROAS. And of course, when we run all those tests and experiments, it's important to put the statistical significance on top of that to understand how important our conclusions are, if they are really valid or they are, let's say, somehow misleading. So those are typical use cases. And what's behind? Of course, behind are pretty boring things, except us, because we love doing that, as team and as a company. But of course, we have to collect the data. Yes, we have to integrate with MMPs, with Google Ads, Uploading, whatever someone has. As I mentioned in the beginning, we, as a services company, we do it in our customers' infrastructure, in their subscription on Google Cloud or AWS or any other infrastructure. So by integrating all those data on user behavior, revenue, cost, and other data accessible, we put everything into the data warehouse. Then, this is another hidden and very silent but important hero of that game, is data validation. If we have bad data, we will have bad outcomes. It's easier to talk about AI, which is sexy and nice, but at the end of the day, if we have poor data at the beginning, we'll have bad outcomes. So even the duplication, removing outliers, adjusting and modeling data is really important part, pretty time consuming, but without that we'll have bad decisions. And then, of course, is all that modeling. So more interesting part, like preparing KPIs, preparing data to machine learning models, and then training models, predicting those mentioned KPIs, and showing them on proper visualization dashboards or other, sending those information to other tools. And for example, for predictions, just as an example, because I don't want to cover all of them, for predictions we often use such an approach for lifetime value and ROAS predictions. So we do pre-processing So all the data preparation mentioned before about engagement, about geos, about traffic variables, so the data sources and networks from the user acquisition perspective. And then we model retention using, for example, XGBoost modeling. If we do that, then we have the retention curve model, for example, for 120 or more days, depending on the game character and the data we have. And then, when we have it, we can also calculate ARPDAU curve on the campaign, country level, app version level. Everything we do, we keep in mind what I said before, as much as cross-dimensional as possible, because this gives you that complexity and ability to take different decisions on different cross dimensions. And then based on that, we can add, again, to that retention ARPDAU and lifetime value calculated from that, we can add spends, and having spends, we have ROAS. Easy on the picture, more complicated in execution, but finally, we can have reports, and before we finish, we also show you some examples how it could look like for how we work with it, with real data. And I would also pick up one more use case from the general picture, the whale hunting. In user acquisition, it's pretty important to find right users, not just users, but those who are the most valuable and could bring the most return on investment. And I will describe you the process which is used by our customers and created together with us for Google Ads campaigns targeted on special proxy event. What does it mean? So we have the game which generates a lot of events. We gather all those events, and those events describes different, let's say, areas of the game. They could be related to monetization, so how many rewarded ads somebody saw, or how many in-app purchases, what was the retention, other behavioral events. And by analyzing those events, we can try to find the user who is, in our or publisher game studio perspective, the most valuable user. It doesn't necessarily have to be the biggest LTV. It could be the combination of all those things. The good user could be maybe that user who is good from the retention perspective, who is, let's say, good enough from this perspective, and this is some kind of, let's say, exploratory analysis which should be done together with business people of the studio to find who is a good user from our perspective. Then, of course, we have to analyze, is that user representative? Do we talk about 1% or maybe we talk about 5% of our users who are valuable to us? So that's important to understand. If you understand that, for example, analyzing 1 year of behavior of many cohorts, then we can try to find events which describe this user within first 7 days of their lifetime within the game. So when we find that pattern, which shows if that pattern happens, this is probably that user which is the most valuable within the year. This is important because, of course, to build such an approach, we have to have data from bigger period. But then, when we build it, we can find those users as soon as they come. And if they come, we can do the following thing, which I mentioned, and called proxy event. We can create something we call proxy event. It's a logical event. It doesn't describe end of the level, or it doesn't describe number of. It is a combination. It's a logical combination of algorithm which shows that it, with proper weights, showing, let's say, influence of various dimensions into the physical finally event created in the game. But this is a logical one, meaning that it doesn't mean nothing. It's some mathematics behind. And if we have that user, we can use this event to target it in Google Ads for campaigns. So then, finally, we can gather to our application users who are exactly fitting our profile we are looking for. And this is pretty interesting. I wouldn't say it is one-time success, you do it and you are king. It's again, like in that analytics, experimentation. For some time, it will be valid, but user is changing, game is changing, so then we have to think again, who is the best user. But it's very valuable for user acquisition and to finding those right users. And before we finish, I wanted to give a microphone to Wojciech and to show you some examples of dashboards and how our customers are using that. With one disclaimer, everything we show is not data from any of our customers because we cannot show it, but it's, let's say, created for the demo purpose, but it's exactly how we use it. Yeah?
Thank you, Kamil. The first demo is product metric report. At the top, we have filters for all of the dimensions of the analysis. We have filter for the install date, for the country, for the application, in case you have multiple applications in the report. We have filter for user acquisition network. Users coming from different user acquisition channel can behave very differently. We might want to, for example, out-filter some networks which can distort the data to look at the clean view. We have filters for operating system, application version. We have also filters for dimensions related to A/B testing, the experiment number and experiment variant. And the last filter is daily application, meaning tenor. Use case for this filter is that, for example, we release new application version. We want to compare it against the old version. And to make sure that comparison is fair, we filter only to the first days for which we have data for the new application. So the old version for sure is not favored due to having larger amount of data. Below the filters we have tables also broken by each dimensions of analysis. You can compare KPIs looking at application version, variant, etc. Maybe we can take a look now at KPIs. Let me zoom in. I hope you can see it now better. We have here monetization KPIs like ARPDAU, IMDAU, eCPM, and fill rate. ARPDAU and IMDAU we have also calculated by age of out formats. We have retention. We have engagement KPIs, and the most important LTV, which is resultant of all of these previously mentioned KPIs. We have short-term LTV calculated based on historical data, and we have long-term LTV, which we predict. Such wide range of KPIs allow to assess experiments in a very comprehensive way. For example, we can observe the relation between aggressive monetization and the impact on churn to make sure that we do not break sustainable environment. Now I can filter to one of the experiments. And let's filter to the most important market for this application, United States. And now let me zoom in. You can see that the first variant is better in terms of ARPDAU, but the second variant is better in terms of retention. Now when we take a look at LTV, the first variant is better in a short-term LTV, but we can see that its curve gets flat earlier. And then when we look at the long-term predictions, the experiment with the better retention is in fact better. This is why it is so important to look at the whole picture, and predictions always allow to see the whole picture and be better in decisions. I can filter now to another experiment. Maybe I can filter to more countries. Let's take Germany, Canada. And let me scroll down now to the last table, which is broken by both experiments and countries. And what we can see here that the country tiers, like countries from the second and third country tier, are better in one experiment, and USA, Germany, Canada, first country tier is better in another experiment. So this report allows to draw that kind of insight which product owners take under consideration while managing the application. Now I can move to the user acquisition report. Here once again we have filters and tables broken by all of this dimension of the analysis. And what's important here, that except historical data, we have here also predictions. And we can change the filter to the predicted. And all of the missings are now filled in with predictions. Predictions are highlighted in green. We don't have predictions for the the most recent install date because we always wait 3 days to collect behavioral data and LTV data. But with it, user acquisition manager can take a look at breakdown by campaign. This is the most important. And he can make decision out of it. To help user acquisition manager digest large amount of data, we also create additional visualization layer based on the predictions. We call it user acquisition recommendations. It shows day 7 ROAS, which is calculated for selected time frame, and day 7 target ROAS, which means where you should be at day 7 to expect that you will reach your business goal. It can be break even at day X, or 50% profitable at day Y, or whatever business decides. And based on this, with a quick look, the acquisition manager can make decisions about the spend allocation. We're running out of time, so maybe I will skip next one and show the last one, which is SK Ad Network report. So for iOS, we cannot rely only on the attributed data, we need something else. So for this, we have Ad Network report, which we built based on SCAD data. When we took at the breakdown by campaign, we see here day 0 ROAS, which is calculated based on not the raw SCAD data, but modeled SCAD data. We model conversion value nodes. These different campaigns have different conversion value nurture. So to make the comparison fair, we always need to model it. And that way we get to day 0, but day 0 is never enough for marketers to make decisions. So here once again come predictions. And with predictions we model mid and long-term ROAS. We model it based on attributed users' behavior, if there is enough of them, or we model it with the global country relations when there is not enough users for particular campaign with the attribution. And that's it. Thank you for your attention.
And few words of the summary. So, as I mentioned, from our perspective, what I want to leave you with is that complexity is manageable if we take a proper approach and keep eye on quality. Quality is still important. It's like a silent hero of that game. Second, measurement and predictions are better than guessing. So whenever you could, do predictions because they are pretty accurate, especially in gaming when the speed and amount of data is pretty big. If we have proper predictions, we'll take decisions faster before we burn money. Second and third, using data consciously between all those areas will build your competitive advantage. And we observe companies who are very data-driven, and they analyze every move they do, and they are growing like hell. Those who are more intuitive, they are growing as well, but not as fast and probably not as profitable. And there is no one silver shot bullet, as I mentioned. This is process. This is important. And my other advice, you have plenty of solutions you can use for data analytics, but what's important, my advice is do it your way, meaning in your infrastructure, in your on-premise or cloud infrastructure, have data in your database and calculate metrics as you want, not as any black box solution will show you. Because if you trust black box solutions with KPIs shown, then you have one tool for user acquisition, another tool for gameplay, another tool for app development, another tool for monetization, and they are showing, let's say, almost the same KPI, which is calculated on different data in a different way, and then you are lost, because you are not comparing apple to apples, and then you have silos, and that's one of the biggest risks in that. If you find it interesting, we are here. Till tomorrow we can talk. I know that looking at numbers from the stage is not easy, but we are happy to discuss and get in touch with you. Thank you very much.